The crowd gathered at the town hall steps fell silent as Shane Thompson stepped out of the black SUV, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the faded jeans he wore when they forced him out 20 years ago. 20 years ago, they had kicked him out of Oakwood for being gay, and today he was returning as their newly elected mayor. The late September sun bathed the square in warm golden light, casting long shadows across the brick sidewalks where he had once walked hand in hand with Troy under cover of darkness. Shane adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and walked forward, the weight of every stare pressing against his chest like an old familiar ache. A few faces in the crowd, he recognized instantly: the cashier from the corner store, the mechanic who used to fix his dad's truck. Their expressions shifted from shock to something harder: suspicion and resentment. He had left Oakwood at 19 with nothing but a backpack and a broken heart after his father discovered the letters Troy had written him hidden under his mattress. That night, the argument had exploded in the living room, his father shouting words that still echoed in his nightmares, while his mother stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaming down her face but saying nothing to stop it. Troy had waited outside in the rain, their goodbye a desperate hug filled with promises neither could keep. Shane had hitchhiked to Chicago that same night, vowing never to return. Yet here he was, the man who had clawed his way through night classes, built a career in city politics, and won a surprise writing campaign that no one in Oakwood had taken seriously until the votes were counted. Inside the town hall, the staff lined up awkwardly, offering stiff handshakes and forced smiles. The city clerk, a woman named Martha who had babysat him as a child, avoided his eyes as she handed over the keys to the mayor's office. "Welcome back, Mr. Mayor," she said, her voice tight. Shane nodded, thanked her, and stepped into the room that smelled of old wood polish and fresh paint. He set his briefcase down on the massive oak desk and looked out the window at the square below. People were still milling around, whispering in clusters. This was not the triumphant return he had imagined in his late-night planning sessions, but it was the one he had chosen. He had come back not for revenge, but to prove that the boy they threw away could become the leader they needed. Hours later, as the sun dipped lower, Shane walked the short distance to the small apartment the city had prepared for him above the old bookstore. The streets felt smaller, narrower than he remembered, yet every crack in the sidewalk brought back memories. At the park bench near the fountain, he paused, remembering the night he and Troy had sat there talking about dreams until the stars came out. A car horn blared, pulling him back. He continued walking, his mind racing with the decisions ahead. Would he push for the inclusivity programs he had promised during the campaign, or ease in slowly to avoid backlash? The choice felt heavy already. By the time he reached the apartment door, his shoulders ached from the tension. He unlocked it, stepped inside, and closed the door behind him, leaning against it for a long moment. This was his city now, and he would not run again. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Shane arrived at the office early, reviewing the budget documents left on his desk. The phone rang constantly, reporters from the local paper wanting comments on his historic win as the first openly gay mayor in the region's history. He answered each call with calm, measured words, focusing on unity and progress. But when the door opened and his sister Mia walked in, her face pale, he felt the ground shift. She had stayed in Oakwood, married, had kids, and rarely answered his calls over the years. "Shane," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't think you'd actually come back." He stood up, crossed the room, and pulled her into a hug, feeling the years of distance melt just a little. They talked for an hour about their mother, who had passed 5 years earlier, about their father, who still refused to speak his name. Mia admitted she had voted for him in secret. That small admission gave Shane the first real spark of hope. By afternoon, he had his first official meeting with the city council. The room was bright, with sunlight streaming through tall windows, illuminating the polished table and the faces around it. Several members offered polite nods, but one man, Derek Harlan, an old high school friend turned councilman, stared with open hostility. Derek had been the one who accidentally, on purpose, let the secret slip all those years ago. "Welcome back, Shane," Derek said, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Hope you don't plan on turning this town upside down." Shane met his gaze steadily. "I plan on making it better for everyone, Derek." The meeting dragged on with discussions of road repairs and school funding, but underneath it all, Shane felt the undercurrent of resistance. As it ended, he lingered to speak with a few supportive members. One young woman on the staff pulled him aside quietly. "Some of us are glad you're here," she whispered. "We need change." Her words stayed with him as he left the building that evening, walking toward the diner for a quick dinner. The diner smelled of coffee and fried food, the same as always. He ordered a burger and sat at the counter scanning the room. That's when he saw Troy across the way, sitting alone with a cup of coffee. Troy Harlan, the boy he had loved, the man he had never forgotten. Troy looked up, their eyes met, and the world narrowed to just that moment. Troy stood slowly, walking over his steps, hesitant. "Shane Thompson," he said softly. "You really did it." Shane nodded, swallowing hard. "I came back, Troy. For all of us." They talked for 20 minutes about nothing and everything, Troy mentioning his job as a school counselor, his divorce years ago, and the son he was raising alone. The conversation was careful, guarded, but beneath it lay the old connection, unbroken by time. When Troy left, Shane sat there alone, the food untouched, his heart pounding with a mix of joy and fear. This return was already more complicated than he had planned. That night in his apartment, Shane stared at the ceiling, replaying the day. The hook of the campaign had been simple change, but the reality was layered with old wounds, new hopes, and choices that would define not just his term but his life. He had decided to return knowing the risks, and now he would face them head-on. The first file of his story as mayor had begun, and the pages were already turning faster than he expected. The following week brought a rhythm to Shane's days that felt both foreign and familiar. He woke early each morning, jogged through the quiet streets of Oakwood, noting the potholes, the faded storefronts, the places where kids gathered after school. His mind constantly turned to the decisions ahead, how to allocate the limited budget, how to address the growing divide he sensed in every conversation. On Wednesday, he scheduled a community listening session, inviting residents to share concerns. The turnout was modest, but the voices were loud, some praising his vision, others questioning if a man with his background could truly understand the town's conservative roots. Shane listened, nodded, took notes, and responded with honesty. "I left here broken," he said at one point, "but I came back whole and ready to serve every single one of you." A few heads nodded, others crossed arms tighter. One afternoon, he ran into Troy again, this time at the hardware store on Main Street. Troy was buying paint for his son's room, their carts almost colliding in the narrow aisle. They laughed awkwardly at first, then fell into easy conversation. Troy shared how he had stayed in Oakwood after Shane left, taking a job at the school to help kids like they once were. "I got married, Shane," he admitted quietly. "Thought it would fix everything. It didn't. The divorce was hard, but my boy Jake is the best thing that came from it." Shane felt a pang of old regret. "I never stopped thinking about you, Troy." They walked out together, the autumn sun warm on their shoulders, and sat on a bench outside, sharing stories of the years apart. Troy had built a quiet life volunteering at the youth center, helping teens navigate their own identities without ever fully claiming his own. Shane spoke of Chicago, the late nights, the campaigns, the loneliness that followed every success. Their talk stretched long, neither wanting to end it. When they parted, Troy squeezed his shoulder. "I'm glad you're back. Really glad." The family dinner Mia organized that weekend tested Shane's resolve. Their childhood home looked the same, faded blue, siding, the porch swing creaking in a breeze. Their father refused to attend, but their mother had passed, and Mia tried to fill the space with laughter and stories of her kids. Halfway through the meal, the conversation turned to Shane's return. "Why now, Shane?" Mia asked, her eyes searching his. "Because I realized running away didn't change who I am," he replied. "And this town needs someone who understands what it's like to be pushed out." Mia nodded, but her husband shifted uncomfortably, changing the subject to football. Later, as Shane helped with dishes, Mia pulled him aside. "Dad still won't talk about it, but I think deep down he knows he was wrong." Shane felt the old wound sting, but he chose forgiveness in that moment, deciding not to push. He left the house feeling lighter, yet aware that healing would take more than one meal. Back at the office, Monday brought the first real political challenge. A group of conservative residents filed a petition against his proposed community center expansion, citing concerns over programs for at-risk youth, which they feared would promote certain lifestyles. Shane read the petition in his bright, sunlit office, the words blurring. His anger rose, then settled into determination. He called a staff meeting, laying out his vision. "This isn't about agendas," he said. "It's about giving every kid a safe place." The team nodded, some enthusiastically, others with hesitation. That evening, he met Troy for coffee at the park, their conversation turning deeper. Troy admitted his fear for Jake if things got ugly. "I don't want him to go through what we did." Shane reached across the table, their fingers brushing. "We decide our own path now." The touch lingered, a quiet promise. As the week ended, Shane stood on the town hall steps watching the sunset over the square. The choices were stacking up, each one carrying consequences for his heart, his career, and the town he had once fled. He had decided to move forward openly, and that decision felt right even as it scared him. The reconnection with Troy added another layer of hope and complication, but he welcomed it. Oakwood was changing slowly, and so was he. The first town council meeting of Shane's term crackled with tension under the bright lights of the chamber. He sat at the head of the table reviewing notes while council members filed in. Derek Harlan took his seat with a smug nod, his eyes challenging. The agenda included routine items, but Shane had added a discussion on updating anti-discrimination policies for city employees. As he presented the idea, the room grew quiet, then erupted. One member slammed a fist on the table. "This is exactly what we feared when you won, Shane. Bringing your personal life into city business." Shane kept his voice steady. "This is about fairness for all residents, not my life." The debate raged for over an hour, voices rising and falling. Shane listened to every argument, noting the fear behind the anger. When it ended, no vote was taken, but the lines were drawn. Later that afternoon, a local reporter called asking about rumors of his past with Troy. Shane confirmed the friendship without details, choosing transparency over secrecy. The article ran the next day with a headline that stirred the town. "Old wounds reopened and mayor's return." Shane read it in his office, feeling the weight but deciding not to hide. He called Troy to warn him. Troy sounded calm but worried. "Jake saw it at school. I told him the truth about us." Shane felt pride in Troy's courage. They met that evening walking along the river path, the water sparkling in the late light. Troy shared more about the years after Shane left, how he had dated women to fit, and how the marriage had been a cage. "I sacrificed my truth to stay, Shane. Now I'm tired of sacrificing." Their conversation ended with a long hug, the kind that carried years of unspoken words. Family tensions peaked when his father finally called. The voice on the line was gruff. "You think coming back makes it right, boy?" Shane gripped the phone. "I think living my truth does, Dad." The call ended abruptly, but Shane chose not to chase it, deciding instead to focus on the town. He visited the youth center that week, talking to teens who shared stories of feeling different. One boy reminded him of his younger self, and Shane promised support. That decision to engage personally strengthened his resolve. By the end of the week, opposition had grown, but so had support. Shane made the choice to host an open forum, inviting all sides. The turnout filled the hall with bright lights and mixed faces. He spoke from the heart about his journey, the pain, the growth, the hope for Oakwood. Some clapped, others walked out, but the dialogue had begun. Troy was there in the back row, his nod of encouragement carrying Shane through. The week had tested him, but each confrontation, each conversation shaped him into the mayor he wanted to be. Building on the forum, Shane and Troy began meeting regularly, their walks through the park becoming a ritual. One crisp morning, they sat on their old bench, Troy opening up about the betrayal he felt when Shane left without a goodbye letter. "I waited weeks, Shane. Thought you'd forgotten." Shane explained the fear, the shame that had driven him to cut ties. "I was scared, Troy. But I never forgot." Their honesty cleared the air, leading to laughter over old memories. Shane decided to involve Troy in a community outreach program, pairing mentors with youth. Troy agreed, his eyes lighting up with purpose. Political pressure mounted when a trusted aide leaked private notes about inclusivity plans to the press. Shane confronted the aide in his office, the sunlight revealing the man's regret. "Why?" he asked. The aide shrugged. "Thought it would help the town." Shane chose not to fire him, instead using the incident to hold a press conference reaffirming his commitment. The town divided further, but Shane saw it as a chance for growth. He and Troy discussed it over dinner at a quiet cafe, their hands brushing under the table. Troy admitted his fear of being fully out, but Shane's support gave him strength. "I want to stand with you." Misunderstandings arose when Shane saw Troy with an old friend and assumed the worst. They argued briefly on the phone, but met to clear it, Troy explaining the friend was helping with Jake. The resolution brought them closer, Shane realizing his own insecurities from past. He decided to prioritize their bond, choosing vulnerability over protection. The week ended with a joint event at the youth center where Shane and Troy spoke side by side, the bright room filled with hopeful faces. Each choice deepened their connection and Shane's leadership. Word count approximate 990. File 5. The leak escalated when a local paper published old photos from Shane's youth with Troy. The town exploded with debate. Shane faced calls to resign from conservative groups. In his office, he stared at the clippings, the bright window light highlighting his younger face. He considered leaving, but decided to fight. At the emergency council meeting, Derek attacked him publicly. "This is what happens when we elect someone like him." Shane stood, responding with calm facts and personal story. The room was tense, but a few members defended him. Troy faced his own pressure at school, parents questioning his role. He chose to speak to the principal openly about his identity, the decision freeing yet terrifying. Shane supported him through late-night calls. Their relationship strengthened through the crisis, Shane realizing the sacrifice of public life. He decided against hiding, choosing full transparency in a town hall address. The speech turned some opinions, the crowd listening in the well-lit hall. Family reached out, Mia offering help. The week tested their bond but forged it stronger. A town emergency hit when the community center flooded. Shane coordinated response, working around the clock, Troy helping with youth relocation. In the chaos, a betrayal emerged when Derek spread false rumors about Shane's motives. Shane confronted him in the rain-soaked square, choosing words over anger. The argument ended with Derek walking away, but Shane felt the personal cost. He considered resigning for peace, but Troy convinced him otherwise. Their talk that night was raw, Shane admitting doubt, Troy sharing his growth. They decided to face it together. The crisis resolved with community coming together, Shane's leadership shining. Word count approximate 980. File 7. The climax arrived at the decisive town hall on the inclusivity ordinance. Protesters gathered outside, but the hall was packed, bright lights illuminating every face. Shane delivered his speech, his voice steady, recounting the expulsion, the journey back, the love for Troy and the town. Troy stood beside him publicly for the first time, taking the mic to share his story. The crowd reacted with mixed murmurs, then growing applause as family members, including Mia, and even a silent nod from his father in the back, showed support. Emotions broke open, tears and hugs, forgiveness flowing. The vote passed narrowly, the room erupting in cheers. Shane and Troy embraced the moment of triumph, an awakening complete. In the months that followed, Oakwood began to change slowly. New programs launched at the center, youth thrived, and conversations opened. Shane reconciled further with his family, sharing meals where old pain was acknowledged without erasing it. Troy and Shane built a life together, openly walking the streets hand in hand, the town accepting bit by bit. At the first anniversary event, Shane reflected on the journey, the decisions, the growth. The city was healing, and so were they. Their story proved that returns from exile could spark real change. True or false, a person can fully heal from the pain of rejection by returning to the source of that rejection and leading with love.